All right. Welcome back to the Ernest Medicine Podcast. We're post-holidays. Dr. Brown is no longer donning the naughty Santa cap.
Yes.
But we're into the new year, 2023. It's just like, it just flies.
Yep.
It is unreal.
Yep.
But this is our first episode here in the new year with 2023, and I am going to read this off. This is a longtime friend of Dr. Brown's, somebody who we've had some different personal interactions with. I've met you once before, but I've been a huge fan of your art, and that is the concept for today's episode, is really art and the way that it connects all of us. So our guest today is Hadieh Shafie. She is a visual artist based in the USA. She has been the recipient of a variety of grants, and her work is held in numerous public institutions. For example, the Metropolitan Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, and the British Museum, just to name a few. She has traveled the world with her art, and she joins us here today in the studio for a conversation about art and life. We're going to roll the Ernest Medicine intro, and we will be right back with you. All right, we are back from our intro here. I'm going to kick it over to Hadieh and let her do her own introduction, because I know there's so much more to this story that I don't know, but the two of these guys have so much history, and I'm just excited to be here to sort of hear it. So here is Hadieh. Hey, what's up?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for inviting me into the studio to have this conversation. So I'm Hadieh Shafie. I'm a visual artist, and I have been working full-time as an artist since 2009, I would say. And before that, like many artists, while my career was kind of taking off, I held various different positions in colleges and universities. Originally from Maryland, immigrated here in 1983 with my family at the age of 13 and settled in Maryland, went to high school here. And then as soon as I could, I ventured to New York City to attend Pratt Institute and get my master's. So, going to get my master's at Pratt Institute, it was kind of a time to think about what it is to be an artist. What is that journey like? What does success mean? And it was a wonderful experience, albeit sometimes quite challenging.
Yeah. That's one of the things that whenever you were mentioning finding the path as an artist, that's really tough. And I think you're always looking for sources of inspiration online, trying to identify other people who have carved that path out before you. But it's so unique from one person to the next.
Yes.
It's really quite difficult to understand the right pathway. And I don't think there is really a right pathway. It's just about how you find it.
Right. So. Well, I'm going to date myself here. Back then, there was no online.
Yes.
We learned things from stories and biographies of, who inspired us, but also friends. Like I remember meeting you, and we had this interest in music and also your interest in photography. You always had a camera with you, and you were taking pictures. And those friends and those relationships can also become a source of inspiration. I know we did several projects together where you photographed me with my artwork. And some of those images I still go back to and think about, wow, you were really a storyteller there. And so knowing you way back then and seeing how both of us have sort of progressed in our lives is really interesting. And there are lots of points of connection, I think. Yeah.
But even with that patches of time, I still see that spark in your eye that reminds me of that little 19-year-old.
Yeah.
I remember taking the photos, and, the part for me is capturing, you're stealing time,
Yes.
And by capturing that moment, the story lives,
Right.
because memory is very fleeting, especially as we get to.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing. Memory is a funny thing.
Yes. Yes.
And you're right. Photography, it's one of those things that can freeze a moment and capture time.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's one of the fascinating things for your journey.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it from, even if I knew it,
Mm-hmm.
like when we were in college together, it was like, she is an artist. There's no question.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing you go through that remotely, you know, I wasn't there daily, right? But I could see like your transitions, like, and there was always a sense in me like, go get him, girl. Like, just, you know, go get him. And I could see the struggle. I mean, because it's not easy.
It's not easy.
No.
And you came to New York. You visited me in
Yes.
New York. You saw my life in New York.
Yes.
And the complexities of it.
Yeah.
And for me as an artist, I don't know how it was for you. And you were a biology major or chemistry major when we met in college. And you had this passion for photography as well. And then you went on to becoming a physician. And it's been really interesting for me to see you go through all of that processes and come to something that I really truly believe is you, Ernest. You know, this
I'm an artist.
taking doctors into the home. You know, this is so you. Whereas I think when I think about how traditional institution of medicine is structured, it was always hard to kind of put you into that framework.
Yeah.
And for myself as an artist, it was a way of life. I really didn't exactly know what I was doing. There are not those same linear structures for being an artist. There was no internet. We couldn't Google things and find pathways and figure out information so easily. So like, and I'm dating myself, but I'm not that old. I mean, we're talking like early 90s.
Yeah.
You know, mid 90s. So you got information from your friends. You had a friend who was passionate about something or supported your passion or inspiration. That itself was some kind of therapy. That itself was some kind of structure to support each other. So I think for me, once I decided I was going to go to Pratt and I was going to get my master's. Now, with understanding, okay, well, the master's might give me the educational degree I need to maybe become a teacher. And this is how I earn a living. Because one of the first things you're asked as an artist, well, how are you going to eat? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to be just a poor person? You know? So you find ways to support that passion. And one way is to become a teacher. And the terminal degree for that is a master's degree. So that was the practical reason for going to grad school. But the passionate reason was I chose to go to Brooklyn.
Yes.
In 1993. And it's not the Brooklyn of today.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you took that risk, and you know it was wonderful to see you do that, because I knew then that you weren't, because it's very easy to be complacent. You could have settled into something, you know, that would have been easier in a sense, right?
Sure.
But you wouldn't be where you are, and you know, and I understand being an artist now is still a struggle.
It is.
I mean, you are highly successful. You're internationally known, but it's still a struggle.
It's a struggle. And there's a moment where you realize that, I don't want to say sadly, but one of the challenges is in growing up into becoming a professional artist has to start including thinking about it as a business.
Yes. Yes.
And to begin with, I was not interested in business.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to just make art and find ways to share that art. But of course, the practical parts of it is how is your art going to support you to be able to make more art? Yeah. And then the business part of it comes in. And it's very challenging, just like anything else.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, like even like the industry of art or the industry of healthcare, it's like there are certain players involved in that who profit off of it.
Yes.
That, you know,
yes.
And it's kind of the, you know, what the expectation is that you will do these things because that's just the way it's done.
Right.
You've remained an independent, you know, which, you know, is a struggle, and it's very much the same journey that I've had. Mine has been constantly a lot of, for myself, lots of doubt, lots of like, oh God, what what have I done? You know, the commitment on my end was that there was no other choice for me, you know, and you know, I can't be something else. I have to be true to it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's really the way to go. And I think that's where you really connect, that being true to yourself sometimes forces you to make decisions that are not as linear. They're a little bit more ambiguous. I mean, for you, I think that, well, the impression is, you know, when you're a physician, you can achieve a certain amount of comfort, financial comfort. And the path you're chosen is sort of rejection of that very like concreteness.
Yeah.
And I think that's
I don't own anything. I don't own a fancy car.
So
I don't
that's
own a
it.
house.
I mean, it's okay to own those things, but what I'm saying is that you are making a very, like, you're a healer. And I think that times where you have visited my family at home because they were sick, or have talked to me and consulted me when I was sick, that aspect of when you are ill, to have the doctor come to you is so comforting. And it's something that I think is so deeply needed. For me as an artist, it's funny, I started my journey as an artist with this societal, familial feedback of, you are not going to make it financially. So from the onset, it was like, well, I'm destined to be just really poor.
Yeah. Poor, but your spirit is rich.
Right. Or I have to like have a job to do this thing I really love. And then you find out with time and luck.
Yes. Yeah.
And good fortune that it becomes a business and it supports you. And I believe that it's okay to be successful. It's okay and really important to own your own home. I think one of the things that gave me stability as an artist is when we moved to Baltimore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2005, we left Brooklyn and we moved to Baltimore, and we bought a house in Charles Village. And that house that was crooked in every way, you literally could put a ball on the floor and it would just run, like you would have to run after it.
It had character.
Yes. Gave us such a concrete stability. It was the only place we could afford. So that stability allowed me to focus on my day job and then focus on my studio work and practice. So some level of stability is really important, I think, mentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is mentally really important. So, and talking about that, you know, for me, making art, the repetition in my work, I've often thought about it, that people ask me, there's so much repetition in your work. How do you do it? And I've had, you know, studio assistants come in and work with me, and there's a high burnout rate because it can get boring if you're doing the same thing over and over again. But for me, it's very calming.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like your routine, right?
Yeah.
It's something you've developed for yourself, and it sort of aligns.
And all my work inherent in it is repetition. I make work that uses repetitive gestures. And
why?
Why? That's a question I ask every time. And the answer goes back to this memory of being in the kitchen with my grandmother. And she used to make these little chickpea cookies. And my task, I must have been, when I calculate my age and that time, I must have been 5 or 6. She would show me to use a toothpick, dip it in saffron water, and put a saffron dot in the middle of each chickpea cookie. And she was very precise, and she taught me how to do this. And that repetition, that calmness, that memory is very calming for me. And I think somehow it became integral to my personhood.
Yeah.
That repetition is calming, but then what am I calming?
Yeah.
Why I need to be calm,
Yeah.
right? I don't think it's good to self-diagnose oneself. I mean, I've never been diagnosed with this, but I believe I have attention deficit disorder. And now I believe that the reason I really enjoy making the work I do, for me, it's play and the variations, the repetition,
Yeah.
in a way is very therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I gravitate towards anything that has a repetition in it visually.
So mine is a state of flow. For me, it's a passage of how do I move through something. It was just like that was for science and doing biochemistry and all those things. It was a clarity to it. I certainly think with what I do, I'm kind of like an idiot savant of medicine. I'm good at this because I get into this flow and everything else just, it becomes clear to me. It's the best way to describe it. Whereas it may look like chaos, or it may look like there's nothing going on up here.
Right.
It's and it gives me a sense of peace in it. It may look like frantic, but for me, it's like I'm just flowing.
Right.
And so that's how I know what I'm doing is right for me.
Right.
Just like what you're doing with your art is true.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's the art part of it, and then that seeps out into my life. Like another thing that I do that's really repetitive, and people who have lived with me some personalities find it fun, and some personalities find it very not fun. Is that I have this habit. I really like moving things around in a room.
Oh,
and I've done this since I was very young.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about this. And I've been thinking that some of this might be related to a result of PTSD from childhood living in Iran past the Cultural Revolution of 1979. And also, my father was an engineer. Even before the revolution, we moved around a lot. I had a conversation with them a few years ago. I said, do you guys realize that I never went to the same school more than a year?
That's tough.
I didn't know this myself. And my parents were like, that's not true. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to accuse them. I wasn't accusing them of anything. I was just saying that it must have been hard on you too. Like packing, unpacking, packing, unpacking. And we did a kind of a historical count of the houses we lived in, the cities that we lived in. And we moved, with the exception of 1 year where we were there for a year and a half, to when we came to the States. We moved every year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sort of being constantly unsettled in that manner.
Yeah.
All within Iran, though.
All within it. My father was an engineer, geologist, and he was sent out to do water studies and look for water. And so we lived in Azerbaijan, Tabriz, and then we moved to Tehran again. Then we moved back to Tabriz. Then we went to London. But even within Tabriz, I moved from one school to another because they changed houses. Or the Farsi speaking language was not available in all the public schools in Azerbaijan, or Turkish speaking.
Yes, yes.
So there was a lot of movement. And then moving in 1983 to United States, for the first time, I remember leaving the house we lived in. It was the first time I had lived in the same house for 6 years. And for the first time, I was really sad. I felt this overwhelming sadness leaving a house. It was a house in New Carrollton, Maryland.
Yeah.
And when we left it, I didn't understand what this was because I hadn't felt it for
You had
anything
been
else.
transient. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that moving around things in my own home and repetition in the work is a fine kind of therapeutic. My own structures to like calm myself.
That's funny because I move every 3 years.
Do you?
I have this habit, not a
Yeah.
habit, it is a purpose that I don't own anything. So
Yeah.
my preference is to all within inside the city to move every 3 years.
Okay.
And it's kind of like sometimes it's been less than 3 years when something's come up.
Yeah.
And it's a certain sense of just picking up, nomadic in a
Yeah.
sense. But the problem, mine was the opposite. I lived in the same house since I was born. And when that was gone, there was a sense of loss to it. And I
Right.
said, well, I'm not going to lose that again. Because
I remember that house.
I'll
Yeah.
keep moving. And I'm still moving.
Yeah.
So I get it.
How did you cope
So you
with
don't
that?
want attachment. I'm sorry.
No,
I
no, no, go
interrupted
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
So you're avoiding attachment to a place. And I'm looking
I
for.
don't think I'm at the stage in my life where attachment is not significant anymore.
Okay.
I think because I'm flowing.
Yeah.
And I can't flow if I'm tethered,
Yeah.
which is why I do house calls. If you stick me in a clinic, I will die. If
Yeah.
you stick me into a hospital, I will wither up and die.
Oh no.
I need to move,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It's the not moving that, and maybe mine is, an OCD or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. Whatever it is, I know that this is right for me. It's definitely not right for other people. Other physicians and things like that, I understand it. Just like, for certain artists, they're like, it's different for them. Right?
Yeah.
And that's where the being individual is important. That's why when things are just commoditized, like art or music or, medicine, then it's devalued, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on to, chat DDP and say, hey, look, write me a script for this antibiotic to treat this. And then it'll just,
Yeah.
it's all done,
Done.
right?
That's a point we have to hit on, is this chat GDP thing, because it's gonna
Bonkers.
it's gonna overthrow Google. It's gonna revolutionize everything, and it's
Really?
it's kind of wild. It's a little bit scary. It's kind of exciting at the same time. But I didn't know that about you living in the same home for. That's my situation. My dad still lives in the home where I was. I grew up essentially, and there's this like immense, almost anxiety when I think about him in his old age, maybe moving somewhere else, like to be closer to family in St. Louis. I'm like, you can't sell the house.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to the house? It's like
Yeah.
I have this very deep attachment to the house.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's not healthy.
I know, and I recognize that, but it's like I'm curious to know how you coped with that, because it's sort of a weird emotional dynamic I have.
I mean, I think it was
that
good
house.
because I didn't have control over that. My mom did. So when my mom sold the house, it was kind of like, when my father passed away, I was taking care of the house, and it was too much, and I was just like, there were other things I should have been doing, and moving, I was stuck in a sense.
Yeah.
And so my mom selling the home was the best thing possible, because ever since then, I've been kind of like, I don't want to stay in one place,
Well, I wanted to take it back even further, because we talked, about your movement to the United States, but some of the inspiration maybe for your art in and of itself, did that draw from certain aspects of childhood or different events that you may have gone through? What did that look like when you've had time to reflect on why you make what you make?
Right. I think that's a really good question. And I like the way you positioned it, because when you make art, at least for me, it's always, there's this moment of you sit back and you look at it. Well, I mean, there are these aesthetic questions. Do I like what I see? And then, well, what does it mean? And I'm still learning about my own work. And with time, I am finding new symbolism in the work, and I attach meanings to those things. Of course, it's my experience and my sort of like redefining the form to make sense of it. But for sure, the work are based on reimagining what a book form is. And in the most basic form of it, where strips of paper have text printed on it and handwritten on it, and then they're rolled into each other to create enough material to create one piece. You know, they come together to create one work that at first, when you look at it at first glance, it just looks like rings, concentric
Yeah.
It's
lines,
really fascinating,
circles
though.
of color.
Yeah.
But if you see it in person, you see that there's depth. They're about an inch thick. So they're miniature handwritten books with the edges painted. So how I came to this form was sometime in 2002. I had gone back to this book that I read as a child, which is called The Little Black Fish, which was on the watch book, like books to watch list, both before the revolution and after the revolution. And the story is the story of a little black fish.
What do you mean by that? Books to watch? Can you clarify that point?
Yeah, books that are targeted as
okay.
political or not banned, but on the sort of like a watch list.
I gotcha.
Because the story is story of a little black fish that wants to swim upstream and out of his safe pond to go wander the world. And everyone is worried in his neighborhood and tells them, don't go because you could be eaten by a big fish. This children's story is written by Samad Behrangi, who was known to be an author that was very sympathetic to children's issues in Iran and the working class. And so he had these political ideas and focuses on his stories. Some of the stories dealt with a child who sells beets on the street and can't go to school. And this one particular story is about a little fish. So various different political groups at different times have used the symbol of a black fish as a political symbol for changing society and how the poor and disenfranchised are affected. And the end of the story is that there is a little red fish that's hearing the story of the little black fish. So this idea of perpetuating this story. So I took pages of this book sometime in 2002, and it's a story I've gone back to again and again. And I've tried to, in my own art, pay homage to it or find ways to express it visually. And I started taking pages of this book and leaving in public spaces with certain sections highlighted and translated into English. Then I was one day in my studio and I had inherited a table that had a bolt missing. And I started putting the story in the crevices of this table. And where the bolt was missing was circular. And the only way I could get the paper in there, I couldn't fold it. I had to roll it. So I rolled it, and it was a serious aha moment for me because when I pushed the paper through, it disappeared. And all that remained was the circular edge, right? And that visually really struck me. I had a showing of this. People came and saw this in an exhibit, and people's inclination was to want to pull out the paper and read it. And one of my professors at the time did this, and he saw that I looked at him, and he looked at me and said, was I supposed to do this? And I didn't have an answer, and he was really embarrassed because he had touched art, and you're not supposed to touch art. Anyway, that concept and that idea grew over time. It went from sculptural form and performance form back to becoming painting and sculptural form. And over time, it changed from pages of that book to one singular word. And the singular word was a word that I had been drawing in concentric circles when I was at Pratt, which was the word passion. And it's linked to the ideas in Rumi's poetry of ascendance and losing the physical form and the dance of the whirling dervish around his own heart and in a circle. They dance until they no longer have the physical sensation you have of dizziness. And this is one way of losing the physical form and ascendance. And as a woman looking at this and not being able or allowed to engage in that, all these ideas sort of collided. And when I was doing these papers, I recalled those drawings and I merged the drawing of the word of Ishq with the paper. And so this new form is formed. It also goes back to the idea of what I experienced after the Cultural Revolution in Iran, where in my culture, poetry is recited quite often. The word ishq, passionate love, permeates everything. But after the revolution, it was used as a way to be lover of the revolution and tell on other people. And then later to go to war with Iraq and for children, to go to heaven for the love of country, for the love of God, for the love of Mehdi and all these things. So I started feeling like this word needed to be protected. And so now it's in the coils of this paper that you can't access these circular forms of
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating how that one little moment with the desk sort of redefined how you approached your art.
But, the meanings that I am attaching to it that also inform and create new works happen over time. Sometimes really quickly, and sometimes slower, at a slower pace, which is similar to any other field, I think, like in chemistry.
Yeah.
You have a hypothesis and you go in the lab and you do this and that, and some things happen really quickly and some things take longer.
That's true. Music, food,
photography, everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I hit on this earlier, and you've mentioned it a couple times, and I just saw this viral video on YouTube about this guy who looks like, he bench presses 700 pounds, talking about ChatGDP. He's obviously like really dialed in his life. But ChatGDP was the focus of the video, and it was fascinating. I was like really drawn into this. It talked about how it's going to dethrone Google as this new AI interface that can help us, live our lives at hyper speed and learn faster, grow faster, so on and so forth. And they talked about, we talk about DALL-E now, sort of auto-generating art at a really rapid pace, and some of the stuff that it produces is pretty insane, to be honest. I'm curious about your relationship with emerging technologies and how art maybe doesn't necessarily compete, but plays with it. Where does that stand in your mind?
Yeah, this is a conundrum.
Yeah, in my work, it has no place, I feel like.
Yeah.
That's my first response.
You're very tangible with your stuff.
My work is slow. It slows down time, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
I don't get attracted to or enjoy any of the generated arts. To each his own. It just doesn't feed me.
Yeah. That's the thing, I think, because when you look at ChatGDP and even DALL-E, it's like a very temporary, transient, so fleeting that it's gone and you don't even, and maybe it feeds into this, this dopamine.
Instant gratification.
That, and but life is, you can't cheat it, you have to suffer. You have to go through everything. The loves, the lives, the deaths, everything. Because a Chat GDP will not live. In fact, I asked Chat GDP, who are you? I am an algorithm.
Did your computer catch on fire?
I have no feelings.
Did you really ask?
Yeah, I did. That was as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, well, let's hit it. And that, it's a tool. It can be used, but it's a matter of who's holding the tool and what are they doing with it. And, there was this discussion that I had been privy to where the description was that we were here to create AI, that is the evolution that is to come, and we are the creators for that. But and it's like,
there's a very
okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I love science fiction.
Yeah.
And I always think about 2001.
Yes, yes.
And it's terrifying. The
Why?
conundrum
Yeah.
of
Oh,
creating
yes.
the AI that becomes so intelligent, that takes over. But I find science fiction incredibly energizing and exciting. One of the things that I think has been really significant for me has been, sadly, the COVID years. The 2 years, the first year of COVID, that was really horrific. And the second one that I spent in New York, or we all spent a lot of that time with our like partners or alone. And I remember when it first happened, I was living in my new apartment in Queens, and everything stopped. And until then, I had been living the life of a New York artist. Lots of social engagements, lots of openings, lots of travel, all those things. Everything came to a halt in the most extreme and scary sense. But within the home environment, it was like, okay, this is my safe place. And I was actually, at the time I was living in Queens, Jason was here. My parents were in Florida. So we were all really alone. And I started, the one place that was open when stores started allowed to be open was this thrift shop on the corner of my neighborhood. And there was nothing else in that neighborhood other than amazing Korean grocery stores and this one thrift shop. And I went there, and he had records, and I bought records.
Wow.
Nice.
And I started listening to classical records. And, you know, I listened to punk and new wave when I was growing up, and then moved from that to jazz. And then I never thought classical would be my thing. But I listened. One of these records was Glenn Gould,
Oh, yeah.
who I thought was a funny name.
Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea who he was. And there was the record, and I was listening to it, and there was some sound other than the music on it. Some person in the room where they were recording, I'm like, what is this? So I Googled him, and I learned about him. And then I started reading Proust in Remembrance of Things Past. Which I highly recommend. I finally finished it. It took me 2 years.
It's hefty.
Yeah, it took me 2 years. But Remembrance of Things Past, and especially the last volume, Time Regained, it's about memory. It's about how you recall memory. How do you experience people and times and places? And how you hold on to that. And how do you deal with it, with losing it?
Yeah.
And so it's been an incredible journey reading that book, and also because of Glenn Gould becoming really obsessed with Bach's music. And these are two new things in my life that I think that re-emphasize for me the need to slow down. And relates back to your question about AI and all these technology things. And that there's a whole generation would say to me, you are backwards, you are out of your mind, that doesn't make sense, I don't want to slow down, so.
Yeah. Well, there's a level of excitement to it, but I think every time that I research these things or utilize these tools, there also is a sense of acceleration to it all. Like it feels like, oh my gosh, this is moving so quickly. You feel that deep within yourself. And that can be a little bit unsettling, especially whenever you consider just how fast these years seem to pass on their own without the addition of any of that. But to know that that is a point of acceleration, not just for yourself as an individual, but maybe, for society as a whole. Like it has the potential to accelerate everything we experience in our lives. That's always a little bit like, holy crap for me. At least that's how I feel when I see those things. But yeah.
So where do you think this is going with medicine for you? Let me ask you that.
Well, I mean, it's already happened in a sense where the automation, in healthcare.
But you're using it to slow down your own process as a healthcare provider. No, I mean, I think
Yeah.
how many people do you see a day? What does your day look like?
2.
You see 2. See, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You go to a doctor's office and you sit there and you're surrounded by other, people there to see them. You wait, you get in, and oftentimes before I go, Jason tells me, ask all the questions you need to ask, slow them down. Like, but you're like, you want to have this conversation and you can tell they're like,
Whirlwind.
They're not there.
well, I think they're trying to do their best and they know 20 other people are waiting for them.
Yep. Yeah. That's so for me, medicine is time. Healthcare is all about factory. It's just how fast can we get that conveyor belt going, and it doesn't really matter what the product is. But, even when you look back in time, the history of medicine, it was like, what is the root for medicine? The root is that you care for people, that the purpose is in caring for someone, you are creating something. You are creating health in a sense. And in doing so, it is for the betterment of others.
Yeah.
And it's not, one would say, well, that's kind of altruistic. But no, if you are healthy, then your energy will come back to me, and together we can be healthy. If you are unhealthy, I will be coming down with you, right? That's the whole sense. We're connected. Okay. And if we're disconnected, which is what healthcare is, then we're commodities. We just give the pill, move down the line, answer that one question you came in here for. You'll have to schedule another appointment for that. It's the whole sense of how much energy is being put into this and what's the product that's coming out of it. It's grossly deficient. I always go to the economics. When 22% of our GDP is healthcare, and you look at a place like Turkey, which we just came from, it's only 5%. Then you have to go, well, what the hell is this other 17% for? It's profit. We're both punk rock, by nature.
Yeah.
So we're always questioning and doubting and, knowing that people, their motives.
Yeah.
But for myself, it's just a matter of, if it comes anything to augment in a way that preserves that nature, then I can see that and embrace that and use that as a tool only. I think there is some validity to it in a sense. Like even graphic designers who've talked about Dali, they've said that, well, it opens up the mind of possibilities quicker than you would be able to. It's like, are we in a sense limited by our own capacity? And using a tool, just like we use a paintbrush, we're not using our fingers like the cave people did. We're using a brush, or we're using some other instrument, just like in medicine too. Is it a tool? Yeah. And then it's a question of who's using the tool and for what purpose we're using the tool.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So I embrace it. Yeah. I think we have no other choice.
True, yeah.
And we have still yet to come to quantum computing, which is, if we look at it, even if we look at it on a scientific level, it's like we are 3-dimensional. If we're 2-dimensional, like I put this cup down, the 2-dimensional person will only see a circle, won't see the rest of the cup. Well, what if we're the 2-dimension and there's something up there?
Yeah.
Right? And that's where so in my spirituality, it's always a sense of that there has to be something more, because there's a limit to what us, and the question is, will a tool open the door for us?
Yeah, I like using the tools as I need them. Sometimes I think I don't need any more tools.
Got all the tools.
This is working for me. I don't need any more tools. But I'm not opposed to it being out there as long as it's not forced on me. So sometimes, I go to my phone and I start using, let's say, a program that I'm used to, and I start seeing changes. I'm like, why?
Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Yeah.
It was fine. I had just gotten to know you. And for a long time, and still this is true, I just don't update anymore until I'm forced.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've started doing that.
No.
And
that's
when the
true.
whole concept of cloud came in, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I have a computer that everything is on it.
Yeah.
Right? And finally, I was forced to use, I bought a new computer, but I can't, it doesn't have a disk, so I can't, the software I have on the other computer doesn't match. So I have now used all the online software.
Download everything.
And I was so annoyed that I had to pay like a monthly fee
For everything.
for everything forever.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, where are my files?
Yes.
So I still refuse to use the cloud. Everything's still on my hard drive. So, and then I'm thinking, wow, am I going to be one of those people?
It's not the worst thing. Just
I don't know,
stay true.
Yeah, I've always felt like I'm very like modern but technology changes so rapidly.
True.
That keeping up with it sometimes itself feels like
Exhausting.
And it's a question of, that some of these things that are being produced are really to kind of make us all conform. We're not conformists, you and I. And so it's a certain point, like this is where I think like even if I had my own AI, then my own AI would handle all this crap,
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, I can free myself from this other stuff. And then your AI could talk to my AI and then be
Yeah.
like,
So
okay.
one daily thing that I use a lot is like Instagram. And then at some point, Instagram and Facebook became one. And now I'm forced
Soulmate.
to have a Facebook account when I don't want it. I don't use it. I don't like it. To just have my Instagram account. And I've been toying with the idea of, how about if I just scrap the whole thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What do I need
Web
Instagram
3.0.
for?
Yeah. No, web 3.0. Knock this out.
Yeah, but then I'm like, but I have this like, I find interesting topics on it. Now I have 2 puppies, and I get these like puppy-centered advice from different people. I just learned how to get Oliver to give me his leash when it's like caught under his leg from someone on Instagram. So I'm like rethinking this whole thing of like not needing it.
I mean, it's a question of still being connected.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, there's no way you can go and find a cave to hide. And, there's.
No.
Yeah. And who wants to?
Well, one segue I wanted to make was into your recent travel. I know you talked about you've obviously been all over the world with your art, which is
Not
amazing.
all over. I've been places.
You've been quite a few places. But I mean, that's definitely an awesome experience to go, to another culture, experience that culture, and especially to be there because of a skill that you have that is like icing on the cake, right?
Yes.
So, but you were in Australia for
I was
quite
in
some
Australia.
time. I was curious if you could tell us about that.
It was my second trip to Australia. The first time I went to visit friends. We have a friend there, and he invited us to go, and I was like, of course, why not? So we went. And the second time around was because I had a solo exhibition there in Sydney, and I stayed on some extra time to do some work and look around a bit more. It's really exciting to go that far. It's curious. I was worried this time because I was going to be away for 2 months, and I wasn't sure how that was going to affect me emotionally. Was I going to get homesick? And I realized, I was there for 2.5 months, and I realized my breaking point is 2 months. Like I was completely okay, enjoying every minute of everything for 2 months, and then 2 months ended, and it was like
I gotta get
a
out.
switch.
It's time to go. I'm sick
All of a
this
sudden,
place.
really homesick.
Yeah.
And the last 2 weeks was like I was in hell.
Oh, yeah.
Like I need to be home now, But yes, it's very exciting. And I still don't feel like I've seen enough of Australia. I've seen several of the big metropolitan cities, but it's still a dream to travel to North Country and see and go places where, it's more of the nature and the landscape that very dreamlike and incredibly inspirational. So both times that I was there, for various weather-related reasons. The first time we were there during the bushfires, and this time I was during winter. So it's just, and work. I was actually really working for 2 months. So there's a third trip to Australia, hopefully.
Coming up.
Well, travel.
It's always been a dream to go there. I
Yeah.
never made it that far south.
Well, it's
but
fascinating because, you know, they still do house calls in Australia.
Do they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And, you know, so part of their education and part of their training and all of these things are things that I definitely want to explore. That in New Zealand, too.
Yeah.
New Zealand's beautiful.
In fact, New Zealand is like asking doctors to come. And I'm
Amazing. You have to go.
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole part of it. Yeah, but I want to go and be able to, I'm kind of the Lorax at this point where I'm kind of like, I need to get these stories in. I need to, before my time's up. Right. Because I'm at the point where mine is my legacy. What am I leaving behind?
Yeah.
I
You're
don't
very
think,
young still, Ernest.
yes, I thank you. Thank you, Hadieh. I love you.
The beard is deceiving. You're quite young, dear. You have many
Yes,
places that you'll be traveling to.
I appreciate that. But I do need to think about time. Right?
Yeah.
And I want to be able to have a body of work that, you know, brings people on a journey. We share stories, we laughter, stuff. You know, there are difficult times, there are happy times. That's what life is. It's not in a chat GDP or in a Dolly. Then it's just a matter of what can we do together? What can we build? And how? And it's that old punk rock in me, which is kind of like, you know, we can do it ourselves, right?
Right.
And so in our stories that we collect, you're being here, you telling your stories, and others out there who are listening, that's what the root of this is. And it's a, just like when I did photography when I was back, it was to capture and steal time.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what, you mentioning Australian, and it's just making me really think about Australians I met. And in general, I have to say there's a level of calm that people have. And I'm thinking it's maybe because they have great healthcare that's very holistic. So if you are sick, if you're not feeling well, you can tell work, I'm not feeling good.
Yeah.
I need a few weeks off.
Yeah.
And people understand. And you go and you take your few weeks off. And you heal and you feel better. Sometimes you don't even have to be like physically ill, apparently.
Yeah.
You simply need time off. So time off is very important and respected. The other thing that seems to be that there is this base income thing that the government like gives you if you need it. So I feel that in general it seems societal way Australians are calmer because they're not always on the edge. Like I feel that we are here in America. Our livelihood, our mental health, our physical health always is on the edge. I feel like you Americans, we feel always like if I lose my job, if I, you know, like all of us within a certain level, like for us that we're normal income, middle class, slightly upper middle class, or even working class, we're not that far from being destitute.
Yeah.
Because if you get sick in America, with the way everything's structured, you can lose everything.
Yep.
In Australia, someone was telling me a story of a woman who immigrated there from Afghanistan, fairly young in her 40s. She was diagnosed with cancer. They moved her into an apartment that was better for her
Wow.
and have given her health care and money, a stipend, to be able to take the most advantage of the treatment she's getting. She doesn't have a really good prognosis, but for however long
that is,
whether it's a year or 10 years, the healthcare system, the government of Australia is helping and taking care of this person. And that is incredible. And I think it goes to humanity. It goes to like really structuring the economy of the country to take care of people who are ill, whether it's mental illness or physical illness, and not blame them. It seems like in the States, if you get sick, you're left alone. I mean, a friend of mine told me about a coworker who continued to work with a brain tumor until he died. Okay, maybe he really loves his job.
Yeah, that's intense. But I can see that being real.
I would imagine you would also prefer to spend time with your family. He had a family.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't work, does he lose his health insurance? So it's just very, to me, it's always mind-boggling how a powerful, wealthy country like we live in.
Yeah.
And then you go out and you see it in contrast to France,
And that's why
Australia.
that's why we want to take this series around the world, because that if you can't travel, that's one of the big things in the United States. We're a large continent, but there are no neighbors except for Mexico and Canada. It's not like living in Europe. It's not like living in any other country. It's very isolated. But even then, Australia's isolated, but they get up and get out.
They only have 25 million population. Even with that, okay, say you have a small population, but the cost of taking care of each other is still high if only 25 million people are bearing it, right?
Yeah.
So how are they able to do it and we can't do it?
Yeah. Oh, there are reasons for it.
So go to Australia, Ernest.
Oh, go to Turkey.
Learn.
We just came back from Turkey. And
Yeah. What is it like there?
You've never been?
Well, I mean, in terms of healthcare, and I have never been to Turkey. I need to go.
You need to come.
Yes.
That is why we're going, because my experience is going to Istanbul and then coming back to the United States. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. I'm just livid that you see these. I mean, one of the first things is going into a hospital. There's a little cafe and people are there and they're chatting away. It's not doom and gloom like most of the hospitals that I know here. And then patients would walk in, a patient who had breast cancer and it was coming into radiation treatment, and the oncologist is meeting the patient's hugging the doctor, and then sitting down, and they're having tea, and then she goes, sits on her room where she has the machine, provide the radiation, she's done, she comes out, gives them a hug and leaves.
Wow.
No insurance card. You have to hand over no series of documents where you sign everything about HIPAA and all this other crap.
Yeah.
The human element is, devoid here because it's been made like this. It wasn't like this. And that's the thing. When you talk, I just had a 99-year-old patient who passed, and I helped her and her family with that passing. And she remembers the days when it wasn't, it was like the doctor lived down the street, and it was,
doctors were in their communities.
No. Now it's like, no, I'm angry.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go back.
Yeah. Also, it just reminds me of my trip to Mexico City. Wow. That was an eye opener. Our friend got sick with laryngitis. And we were like, oh, wow, we're in Mexico City. What do we do?
Oh, it's horrible.
Call a few people. And they're like, oh, just go to the pharmacy. There's a doctor in the pharmacy. And we're like, what? So she went to the pharmacy. There was a doctor there, saw her, gave her medication. And I think her visit was like, $5 US. But that is that is the service that's offered to anyone. They didn't care that she was American, she was not a citizen. Like they don't ask you for anything.
No. There was nobody in the middle.
Amazing.
No insurance, right?
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be as expensive as it is. It's just people are in the middle.
Wow.
So what's next for you? You've obviously had the opportunity. You were like, I haven't been that many places, and then you're like, oh, well, what about Mexico City?
No, yeah.
So where's next on your radar?
In the past 12 months, I was in Australia.
Yeah.
I was in Abu Dhabi. So I've had this very long travel. I'm
Long
really
flights.
looking forward to spending 2023 in the studio, making a lot of work,
Then we'll join
reading
you
books. Please do.
there. Yes.
Reading books and raising my puppies. Like I'm really slowing it down. Yesterday, Sunday, for the first time, we had such an incredible Sunday. We did not turn on any media. Jason, my husband, and I sat on the sofa with the puppies in the living room, reading books, drinking tea. I kid you not.
Sounds
And
nice.
the only interruption was taking them out because we're doing potty training. That was our Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was incredible. So I'm hoping 2023 will go like that.
What kind of dogs do you have?
We got Australian Cobber dogs. Cobber means
got them in
France.
Australia?
Not in Australia. We learned about the breed in Australia.
Ah.
They basically are a Labradoodle,
Ah,
but the original. So no Cocker Spaniel, nothing, no other mixes in there. They are strictly Labrador and Poodle. That's been bred, like, called a Cobber dog, and then that is bred together. So they're really gentle, very kind. They're used for as therapy dogs.
That's nice.
And we're hoping that one of them has an amazing temperament to be a therapy dog. So we're keen on getting that training for him and taking him to, like elderly homes or hospitals.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
be really
and he would really enjoy it. But you guys need to meet them. They're super sweet. They're brothers.
Yeah.
And they're super sweet.
Oh, we have to go.
And a lot of trouble right now.
Oh, good. I like trouble.
Well, we've had a lot of really cool opportunities and conversations with people who are in the health space, now in the world of art. And a lot of those people, especially in the world of health, have been also business owners or sort of like pioneers in their field. And one of the things we want to do is sort of highlight where can people connect with you.
Oh, okay.
Maybe if you have some social handles you can throw onto the screen.
Sure.
Maybe people who are outside of DC, where could they see some of your art? Where would they go?
So right now, actually, one of my works is on long-term installation at the Brooklyn Museum. They just rehung the Asian Islamic art collection, and it's a beautiful rehanging of that. So if you're in Brooklyn, definitely visit the Brooklyn Museum.
Nice.
And online, you can see my work at hadiehshafie.com. And on Instagram, Hadieh Shafie, but between my first and last name and underscore.
Okay.
So you can view some of the work online as well.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I encourage anyone who's listening to go check this out, because the first time I saw your art, I was blown away. I was like, that is so cool.
Thank you.
It's just, the longer you look at it, the more you see, the more texture comes out, the more intricate details that sort of pop out at you. And it's really beautiful. So
Thank you so much.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, we've really enjoyed having you on, and we
Enjoyed
now,
So
being
when are
here.
we coming to see
yes.
Anytime.
What time? 5:30?
Anytime. Let's go.
Well, you've come to this space. You've seen sort of some of the stuff we're operating
Yeah.
with, and we'd love to see your spot too.
Please come.
Just my
Yeah.
my aunt does a lot of art, and I had the chance to sort of film her painting, and it was.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still look back at that footage, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really pretty, and I think it would be so cool to see you do your thing.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Come and visit me. I also share with you some footage that a friend of mine did of my work
Yeah.
or my studio in Brooklyn. But in the meantime, you'll come over and you'll see for yourself firsthand.
That'd be really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
It would. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Absolutely. Well, this is sort of wrapping up this episode of Ernest Medicine for us. It's a great way to kick off 2023. The world of medicine, you don't think about it being artistic, but true healing, I think, really is an art.
Yeah.
And
Well, I believe art heals as well.
yes, it does. Yeah. It's
Art, music.
therapeutic in so many ways for so many. And so the fact that we get to kind of showcase that interconnectedness between the world of medicine and the world of art and how they really make us more human, I think that's a cool way to kick off 2023. So
Sure.
excited for you to be able to spend more time in the studio doing what you love. And that's a special way to spend it. So
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
you're very welcome.
Thanks.
We're going to sign off for this episode of Ernest Medicine. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back with another one very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
And if you happen to find any of this interesting, or more importantly, if you want to collaborate, check out the link below so that you can send us your comments, any stories you may have, anything, we're happy to entertain it. And this is really about us going on a journey together.